Fairy tales don't usually collapse in hours, but Meghan Markle's pregnancy story might be the exception. What was painted as a serene, candlelit birth now looks more like a carefully staged performance riddled with contradictions. From impossible medical timelines to shifting excuses, the cracks in this royal narrative are now impossible to ignore.
I don't care at all for the Harry and Meghan thing.
I think she's a malignant narcissist who is a truly terrible person.
She suffers from such a rare disorder of being unable to just be a human.
Like the gross disrespect to the intimacy and privacy of marriage and childbirth.
When Prince Harry published his memoir Spare, one of the most touching scenes was meant to be the birth of his first child with Meghan Markle. The book painted a glowing picture: Meghan at London's exclusive Portland hospital, surrounded by candles, wellness vibes, and nitrous oxide drifting through the air. Harry described the moment as peaceful, almost cinematic, the kind of birth story that sounded too perfect to question. But the details, once examined, quickly unraveled. According to Harry, Meghan endured not one but 2 epidurals during labor, and yet somehow, just 2 hours after delivery, she was already discharged and heading home with newborn Archie. To the public, this sounded like an extraordinary recovery, almost superhuman. But to doctors, medical insiders, and even mothers who have given birth at Portland, the account raised red flags. Childbirth is not a drive-through experience. Recovery takes time, especially with interventions like an epidural. In fact, medical professionals emphasize that it is almost unheard of for a woman to be sent home so quickly after such a procedure, let alone 2. The logistics made the story even shakier. The drive from Portland Hospital to Frogmore Cottage can take nearly an hour on its own. That means Meghan would have had to deliver, recover, sign discharge papers, pack, and strap her baby into a car seat, all within 60 minutes. For many mothers watching, this timeline felt less like reality and more like a public relations script. As one online critic quipped, 2 epidurals, 2 hours, too unbelievable. What should have been a moment of intimacy and authenticity instead turned into a swirl of doubt. The contradictions didn't just challenge the accuracy of Harry's storytelling, they shook confidence in Meghan's entire narrative. Because once the timeline didn't match up, people began asking a bigger question. If the fairy tale birth was polished into fiction, what else had been?
I appreciate what hard work looks like. I like working hard.
Well, according to their tax documents, they work 1 hour a week.
And I love being that busy.
One of the most debated details in Harry's account was his claim that Meghan received 2 epidurals during labor. To most readers, this might sound like a minor medical note, but for anyone familiar with childbirth, it stood out immediately. An epidural isn't like taking 2 painkillers. It's a complex procedure that involves inserting a catheter directly into the spine. Once the line is in place, anesthesiologists can top it up as needed, but they almost never remove and reinsert it in the middle of labor, unless something has gone very wrong. Doctors who reviewed Harry's story publicly stated that his description didn't make sense. Some wondered if he was exaggerating for dramatic effect. Others suggested Meghan's birth story had been polished into a fairy tale version that ignored medical reality. Either way, the 2 epidurals claim became a focal point of criticism. Adding to the confusion was the supposed timeline of discharge. With 1 epidural, mothers are usually kept under observation for hours. With 2, as Harry claimed, the idea of being sent home almost immediately is unheard of. Critics pointed out that if Meghan had indeed gone through this, it would have set a record in obstetrics for the fastest recovery on record. Candace Owens seized on this contradiction during her commentary. She argued that Meghan's story wasn't just unrealistic, but intentionally misleading. According to Owens, details like the epidural claim were crafted to make Meghan look serene, strong, and extraordinary, while in reality, the narrative simply didn't align with medical facts, and that was the problem. Once this one detail fell apart under scrutiny, it made the rest of the story look suspicious. If even the medical basics didn't line up, what did that say about the larger version of events Meghan and Harry wanted the world to believe?
I'm searching for something to like about her, and it's so hard.
Like the gross disrespect to the intimacy and privacy of marriage and childbirth.
As the questions piled up around Meghan's birth story, critics began noticing another troubling pattern. The explanations kept changing. At first, Meghan said the press wasn't informed about Archie's birth because she didn't want cameras blocking an emergency entrance. Later, she claimed the real reason was that British tabloids didn't deserve the photo because of their racist coverage. And then, a third version emerged, that the press had been notified, but simply didn't show up. 3 different explanations for one event left observers unsettled. When a story shifts that many times, people begin to wonder what the truth actually is. Was it really about privacy? Or was it about controlling the narrative? The contradictions clashed not only with public expectations, but also with royal tradition. Protocol dictates that the reigning monarch must be notified immediately when a royal goes into labor. Yet reports suggested that Queen Elizabeth may not have been informed right away when Meghan entered Portland Hospital. If true, that would mark a serious breach of centuries-old procedure. Royal commentators speculated that the omission might have been intentional, that Meghan wanted to control the story on her own terms, rather than follow the rules of the crown. Others believed the palace itself might have received a different version of events than the one later shared with the public. This was the turning point for many critics. What began as a glossy narrative about childbirth was now starting to look like a deliberate rewriting of protocol. And for royal watchers, breaking with centuries of tradition isn't a harmless detail, it's a red flag. Among the most serious contradictions in Meghan's pregnancy story was the mention of preeclampsia, a dangerous condition that can turn childbirth into a life-threatening emergency within minutes. Preeclampsia involves dangerously high blood pressure and can trigger seizures, strokes, or organ failure. In nearly every case, women diagnosed with it are kept under close monitoring before and after birth, sometimes for days. The idea that Meghan could have been discharged just 2 hours later simply didn't align with medical reality. Doctors familiar with the condition quickly spoke out. One former Portland hospital patient described her own terrifying battle with preeclampsia. Her blood pressure soared to 230/130, and she required magnesium drips, constant monitoring, and a team of specialists to keep her alive. "You don't stroll home after preeclampsia," one medical blogger wrote. "You survive it." That line spread widely online, resonating with women who had endured the same diagnosis. Critics seized on the contradiction. If Meghan truly faced such a serious condition, why was her recovery portrayed like a spa getaway, complete with candles, yoga balls, and serene imagery? For many, it wasn't just misleading. It was insulting to mothers who had lived through the raw, frightening reality of preeclampsia. Adding fuel to the fire was Meghan and Harry's travel schedule shortly after Archie's birth. Within weeks, they were on planes to Italy, Paris, New York, and Toronto. For a woman who had supposedly suffered from preeclampsia, that kind of rapid international travel would have been medically reckless, if not impossible. One insider quoted in the Times remarked, "The schedule doesn't match the diagnosis." Candace Owens took this point further on her show. She argued that Meghan's contradictions didn't just stretch credibility, they disrespected women who had faced dangerous childbirths without the safety net of private clinics and PR teams. Clips of her commentary went viral on TikTok and YouTube, racking up millions of views. By this stage, what began as a glossy story about Meghan's strength and serenity had morphed into something darker, a narrative where every medical detail seemed to collapse under scrutiny. And for many observers, the preeclampsia claim was the tipping point. If such a high-risk condition had been smoothed into fairy tale imagery, then the story wasn't just questionable, it was fundamentally dishonest. The choice of Portland Hospital also became a point of controversy. Known as London's most luxurious maternity clinic, Portland is famous for chandeliers, suites, and private chefs, not for emergency wards or high-risk care. For critics, that detail mattered. Harry's memoir described scenes of emergency pain management, multiple epidurals, and urgent interventions, but the hospital itself is not built for those conditions. If complications arise at Portland, patients are transferred to another facility. That contradiction raised eyebrows. Were Harry and Meghan portraying a boutique experience as though it had the resources of a trauma center? Commentators began asking whether the fairy tale birth had been deliberately staged for public consumption. To some, the polished details, candles glowing, yoga balls, serene quiet, sounded more like a wellness retreat than a medical procedure. Candace Owens capitalized on this narrative. On her show, she argued that Meghan's version of events was tone-deaf at best and deceptive at worst. "You don't turn a geriatric pregnancy into a yoga retreat," she said sharply, referencing the medical term for mothers giving birth after the age of 35. Her comment went viral, shared in TikTok edits and reaction clips that reached hundreds of thousands of viewers. For many, the issue wasn't about disliking Meghan. It was about the larger question her story raised. When public figures reshape real medical events into PR-friendly versions, where does privacy end and fabrication begin? Portland Hospital, once just a backdrop, became a symbol of that tension. It wasn't just about candles and calm. It was about whether the birth of Archie had been rewritten into something it could never have been. If the bigger contradictions weren't enough, smaller details from Harry's memoir only added to the growing doubts. On their own, they might have seemed harmless, but stacked on top of medical impossibilities and shifting timelines, they painted a picture that critics argued was less about truth and more about performance. One of the most ridiculed anecdotes was Harry's claim that he slipped out of Portland Hospital at 2 a.m. to fetch Nando's chicken for Meghan. Fans online were quick to fact-check, pointing out that Nando's closes at 11 p.m. sharp. Was Harry exaggerating for a quirky story, or was this another detail massaged for effect? The meme-worthy contradiction spread quickly across forums, with one viral image showing Harry in a chicken costume sneaking through hospital corridors. Then came the so-called secret elevator. Harry described a hidden passage that supposedly whisked them out of Portland unseen. When reporters contacted the hospital directly, staff bluntly denied the claim. One former patient added that, "Everyone uses the same corridors. There is no secret lift." Online, fans compared Harry's story to a Bond movie fantasy, joking that he might have confused a service elevator with a royal escape tunnel. Even the identity of the delivering doctor became a point of confusion. Early reports named Dr. Penelope Law, but conflicting accounts later suggested she wasn't involved at all. Some outlets corrected themselves. Others left the claim hanging. For critics, if the palace couldn't even keep the doctor's name straight, what did that say about the rest of the story? Candace Owens pounced on these inconsistencies. She argued that quirky details like chicken runs and spy movie elevators weren't just embellishments, they were signals that Meghan and Harry were comfortable bending truth into performance. Clips of her commentary spread fast, drawing millions of views and amplifying the sense that the Sussexes' story wasn't just flawed, but deliberately crafted. By this stage, what once looked like innocent inconsistencies now appeared as patterns. And for many, those patterns pointed toward a credibility crisis. By the time all of these contradictions piled up, 2 epidurals, impossible discharge times, shifting press stories, and disputed hospital details, the original fairy tale Meghan and Harry had told was no longer standing. What should have been remembered as a deeply human, private family moment had transformed into a lightning rod for questions about credibility, performance, and the blurred line between privacy and fabrication. Royal births have never been simple family milestones. They are historic events tied to lineage, succession, and tradition. That's why royal protocol demands transparency and immediate communication with the monarchy. Yet in Meghan's case, protocol seemed to have been bypassed, and the public version of the story shifted depending on the audience. For many royal watchers, this wasn't a harmless oversight. It was a sign that the Sussexes were willing to rewrite history to suit their brand. Candace Owens' commentary amplified those concerns. She positioned Meghan not as a victim of relentless press intrusion, but as an architect of her own credibility crisis. Each inconsistency became another example, Owens argued, of Meghan reshaping reality into PR. Her clips went viral, drawing millions of views and outpacing even mainstream coverage. Whether people agreed with her or not, Owens had ensured that the debate wouldn't disappear quietly. The fallout extended beyond the palace walls. Fans flooded comment sections, some defending Meghan's right to privacy, others pointing out that when public figures build careers on curated narratives, the public has every right to question them. Even Hollywood insiders reportedly worried that Meghan's growing credibility gap could affect future projects. One podcast host compared the situation to Amber Heard, warning that studios don't want another reputational risk. At its core, this scandal revealed something larger about modern celebrity culture. In an age where milestones like childbirth can be repackaged as myth, Meghan's story became a case study in what happens when the polish wears off. For supporters, the contradictions may seem like nitpicking. For critics, they are evidence of something far more dangerous: a willingness to blur fact and fiction at the highest levels of influence. And that's the question left hanging in the air. If Meghan's pregnancy story collapsed under scrutiny, what other royal narratives might one day do the same?